The cultural and historical trajectory of the Aanin people, traditionally designated in Western historiography as the Gros Ventre, represents one of the most complex narratives of adaptation and survival in the North American Great Plains. Known to themselves as the Aanih or Aanin, which translates to the white clay people, their identity is inextricably linked to a cosmological origin involving the sacred white clay found along the riverbeds of their ancestral territories. This name reflects a profound ontological connection to the landscape, as oral traditions posit that the tribe was literally fashioned from this clay by the Creator. Despite the imposition of external labels and the geographic displacements necessitated by colonial expansion, the Aanin have maintained a distinct linguistic, spiritual, and political sovereignty that continues to define their presence on the Fort Belknap Reservation in north-central Montana. The designation Gros Ventre is a quintessential example of colonial linguistic distortion, originating from a failure of cross-cultural communication between indigenous nations and early European explorers. In the late 18th century, French fur traders encountered the Aanin and attempted to interpret their identity through the universal medium of Plains Sign Language. The tribal sign for the Aanin involved a downward waving motion of the hands at the waist or stomach level, which was intended to represent waterfalls, or the people of the rapids. This gesture referenced the tribe's occupation of the South Saskatoon River region, characterized by its frequent rapids. The French, however, misinterpreted this motion as a sign for a big belly, gros ventre in French, leading to the erroneous label that has persisted in official government records for over 2 centuries. Adding to the ethnographic complexity, the French applied the same name to the Hidatsa, a Siouan-speaking tribe located along the Missouri River, whose sign for chest tattoos was strikingly similar to the Aanin gesture for waterfalls. To distinguish between these two culturally and linguistically unrelated groups, historical documents often referred to the Aanin as the Gros Ventre of the prairie and the Hidatsa as the Gros Ventre of the river. The Aanin also acquired the name Atsina from the Blackfoot, a term meaning belly people or like a Cree, often used in a derogatory context during periods of intertribal warfare. The implications of these naming conventions are profound. For the Aanin, the official adoption of Gros Ventre by the United States government represents a form of administrative erasure that modern tribal leaders and educators are actively working to correct. George Horsecapture and other tribal historians have emphasized that while the world may know them as Gros Ventre, they will always remain the people of the white clay, from the dawn to the sunset of time. The Aanin belong to the Algonquian linguistic family, specifically the Plains Algonquian sub-branch, making them cultural and linguistic relatives of the Blackfoot, Cheyenne, and most notably the Arapaho. Approximately 3,000 years ago, the ancestral Arapaho Aanin people resided in the western Great Lakes region, specifically the Red River Valley of present-day Minnesota and Manitoba. During this era, they were a sedentary agricultural people who cultivated corn and lived in permanent villages. Environmental pressures and the expansion of eastern tribes involved in the fur trade triggered a westward migration in the early 1700s. As they moved onto the plains, the tribe underwent a radical transformation in their subsistence strategies and social organization. The arid soil of the plains was unsuitable for traditional corn agriculture, leading the people to abandon farming in favor of nomadic buffalo hunting. Oral traditions describe a pivotal moment in this migration, the crossing of a great frozen river, often identified as the Missouri. It was during this period of transition that the group split into 2 distinct geopolitical entities. The southern bands became the Arapaho, drifting toward Colorado and Wyoming, while the northern group became the Aanin, remaining in the Saskatoon and northern Montana regions. The adoption of the horse in the early 18th century accelerated this cultural shift. Acquired through trade with southwestern tribes like the Pueblo and Spanish settlements, the horse transformed the Aanin into a mobile, formidable force on the plains. Wealth began to be measured in horse ownership, and the ability to travel vast distances allowed for more efficient buffalo harvesting and enhanced trading capabilities. By the late 1700s, the Aanin had established themselves as a dominant presence in the Milk River drainage of Montana, successfully adapting their woodland heritage to the exigencies of the high plains. Historically, the Aanin were organized into 10 to 12 autonomous bands, each functioning as a cohesive social and economic unit. These bands consisted of several related families who occupied specific territories for hunting and gathering purposes. The social structure was patrilineal, with membership and status passed from father to son. To maintain social cohesion and prevent genetic overlap, the bands practiced strict exogamy. Marriage within one's own band was forbidden, necessitating a complex web of interband alliances. Political leadership was vested in band chiefs, individuals whose authority was earned by exceptional deeds in war and consistent generosity in peace. These leaders did not rule with absolute power, but made decisions in consultation with other prominent male members of the band. In the winter months, bands typically camped separately to maximize the availability of resources, but they converged in the spring and summer for communal buffalo hunts and tribal ceremonies. The role of women in Aanin society was essential to the tribe's subsistence and spiritual integrity. While men were primarily responsible for hunting and defense, women managed the processing of buffalo hides, the gathering of roots and berries, and the construction of the skin tipis that housed the families. In the spiritual realm, the wife of a pipe keeper held the title of chief woman, not chiefea, serving as a co-keeper of the sacred bundles and sharing the ritual responsibilities and constraints of her husband. The spiritual heart of the Aanin nation resides in two ancient bundles, the flat pipe, sicha, and the feathered pipe. These are not merely ceremonial objects, but are regarded as living spiritual entities that represent the tribe's unique link to the Creator, known as the One Above. They serve as instruments for obtaining supernatural favor and ensuring the collective well-being of the people. The flat pipe is considered the most sacred of all tribal medicines, even surpassing the sun in terms of ritual veneration. Its origins are tied to the Aanin creation myth, which describes a time when the world was covered in water. A man, accompanied by his family, and the flat pipe supported on a stand of 4 poles, floated alone until he sent animals to the bottom of the water to bring up mud to form the earth. The pipe is thus viewed as the catalyst for the creation of the habitable world. The pipe's physical form is unique, a stone pipe that is notably flat, carved in 4 parts. Historically, the keeper of the flat pipe was a man of immense eminence, often holding a veto prerogative in tribal council meetings. The keeper and his family lived under strict ritual prohibitions, including dietary restrictions and specific protocols for behavior to maintain the pipe's sanctity. In 1900, ethnographer Alfred Kroeber observed the flat pipe bundle hung from its 4-pole stand in the back of a Sundance lodge, underscoring its central role in tribal rituals. The feathered pipe, also known as the thunder pipe, was a subsequent gift from the thunder being to provide the Aanin with additional resources for meeting their sacred responsibilities. It is associated with the power of the storm and the ritual significance of the number 4. The origin story tells of a man who dreamed of a pipe descending from the sky. Upon receiving it, he was instructed to create rules for its care. The feathered pipe's rituals are highly specific, such as the requirement for 44 sticks and 44 stones in the construction of its associated sweat lodge. While the demise of the buffalo era in the late 19th century disrupted the traditional priesthood of the pipes, the Aanin have never abandoned them. Today, the pipes are cared for by caretakers who, while not living under the same exhaustive ritual constraints as the historical keepers, ensure the bundles are protected as the ultimate symbols of Aanin cultural identity. The Sundance, or Wiwanyang Wachipi, was the most important religious ceremony for the Aanin and nearly all Northern Plains tribes. Held annually in late spring or early summer, the ceremony coincided with the seasonal congregation of the buffalo, providing a plentiful food source for the hundreds of people in attendance.
The Sundance was not merely a public festival, but a deep emotional ritual of community sacrifice and spiritual renewal. The ritual took place in a large circular arena centered around a sacred cottonwood tree. This tree was carefully selected and cut down by a man of great bravery. It was believed to be the spiritually strongest of all trees, containing a 5-pointed star in its grain, the mark of the Great Spirit. Dancers, primarily young men who had made a specific vow or sought spiritual insight, would fast from food and water for the 4-day duration of the ceremony. A central, though often misunderstood aspect of the ceremony was the practice of self-mortification. Pledgers would have their chests or backs pierced with bone skewers, which were then attached to the center pole by leather thongs. The dancers would move around the pole, pulling against the thongs until the skin tore free, an act of physical sacrifice offered to ensure the health of the tribe, successful hunts, or the healing of a loved one. This act was seen as the ultimate demonstration of humility and sincerity, a way for the dancer to absorb pain so that his people might be spared. In 1883, the federal government outlawed the Sundance and other traditional ceremonies as part of an aggressive policy of cultural assimilation. For 98 years, the Aʻānīn were forced to practice their religion in secret or abandon it altogether. It was only with the passage of the American Indian Religious Freedom Act in 1978 that the Sundance could once again be openly celebrated. Today, the ceremony continues to be a powerful source of tribal identity, with many modern Aʻānīn viewing it as a celebration of personal renewal and a connection to the mythological plane of their ancestors. The life of Bull Lodge, circa 1802 to 1886, provides an extraordinary window into the spiritual world of the pre-reservation Aʻānīn. Bull Lodge was a warrior, healer, and feathered pipe keeper whose life was characterized by a series of intense, visionary encounters with other-than-human persons. His life history, narrated by his daughter Garter Snake in 1941, stands as one of the most significant ethnographic documents of the Plains Indian religious experience. Born into the poor class, Bull Lodge was motivated as a child to achieve greatness through spiritual discipline. At age 12, he began a relationship with the feathered pipe, calling upon it as his guide. Over the course of several decades, he undertook 7 distinct vision quests atop 7 buttes in north-central Montana, including the Bear Paw and Judith Mountains. Bull Lodge's most famous feat was the healing of his uncle, Yellow Man. Using his ritual cloth, drum, and woodpecker medicine, Bull Lodge prayed to the Above Man, successfully raising his uncle from the brink of death. Bull Lodge himself was said to possess the power of resurrection, though he warned that his life was bound to the buffalo. When the hides required for his medicinal sweat lodge could no longer be found due to the animal's near extinction, Bull Lodge accepted his death, telling his family that those who watch over me had called him home.